requesting everyone to please settle down. We will be starting in 2 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Wednesday's Media Forum here at Habi at Kape in Ayala Malls, Abreeza, Davao City. We are also live via the Mindanao Development Authority's Facebook page. In today's forum, we will be featuring a lot of events, including the recently concluded 48 ASEAN Summit and related meetings, and the special BIMP-EAGA Summit held in Cebu City and chaired by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. And we will also be featuring the upcoming ASEAN Innovation Summit, the Davao Agri Trade Expo 2026, and Halal program. So we have a lot to talk about, so let's start already by introducing our guests and our media friends present here today. For our guests, we have the Deputy Executive Director of the Mindanao Development Authority. We have ASEC Romeo Montenegro. We also have the Regional Director of the Department of Trade and Industry, or DTI-XI. We have Director Romeo Castañaga. And we also have the Vice President for ICT of the Davao Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Chairperson of the ASEAN Innovation Summit. We have Dr. Maria Lourdes Monteverde. All right. I would also like to introduce our media friends present here today. We have Roy Moreno of ABS-FM. We have Mary Rose Damon of ABS-FM, Weather Saldana of ABS. We have Bien Abanos of DXDC. We have AJ Mabasa, Andrea Granada, and Aya Ahmed of PTV. We have Tonton De Venosa of PTV. We have Eunice Felipe of Sansar Davao. We also have Arian Morales and Aisha Magapisa of Radyo 5. We also have Andre Marco Ampig and Christine Carla of Mindanao Times. We have Sir Dennis Lasso of DXUM. We have Miss Angie Chagas and Gerald Almendras from Bombo Radio. We have Gio Tanod from Mindanao Times and R.A. Colina from Mindan News. Our facilitator, Miss Marilyn Roque, is unfortunately not around because she has to attend to an equally important affair, but we will be seeing her in the next episodes. We also have with us the MinDA Media team, and of course we would like to thank our partners, the Ayala Malls Abreeza and Habi at Kape. So we will start already by hearing the introduction or opening remarks of our guests, starting off with ASEC Romeo Montenegro.
Thank you, Iris, and maayong buntag sa tanan sa ato ang taga-suporta in terms of communicating Mindanao, particularly members of the Davao media that had been participating in many of our productive discussions through our weekly Habi at Kape. Daghang salamat. There's a lot to convey. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last few days that shape the kind of growth and development we see Mindanao is going to go through moving forward, and this is something that we look forward to conveying this morning.
Thank you, ASEC. Let us now hear from Dr. Maria Lourdes Monteverde from the Davao Chamber.
Good morning, everyone. So in behalf of the Davao City Chamber of Commerce, we would like to thank MinDA and, of course, the press here for having us today to talk about the upcoming events that we have in the Davao City Chamber. And the goal really is, amidst the noise, let's put Davao in the map, the good map that is in the ASEAN. That's riding on with the ASEAN chairship of the Philippines for 2026. Good morning.
Thank you, Mama Lu. Let us now hear the opening statement of Director Romeo Castañaga.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank MinDA and the press for this opportunity to be here this morning. DTI will be supporting these events by the private sector, elevated into ASEAN level, so the ASEAN Innovation Summit and date. And of course, I tag along Halal because that's also one of the programs that we are supporting under the BIMP-EAGA platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Romy. Before I open the floor to the questions for the media, let us hear from ASEC. We want to know the highlights, what transpired, the agreements and the important updates and points during the ASEAN Summit and the BIMP-EAGA Summit that you want to cascade to the media and the public. Sir?
Thank you. As pointed out by Doc Malu earlier, and of course Director Romy, the conduct of several activities related to ASEAN stretches all the way up to the entire year. Our chairship for ASEAN is the entire year of 2026, and that's why there is going to be a lot of continuing ASEAN-related activities happening, not just at the national level, but also here in Mindanao. And that's where we make sure that there is closer collaboration between government and the private sector in putting forward opportunities we have here in Mindanao that can really be magnified as opportunities in ASEAN and more specifically in the BIMP-EAGA. And last week, while the Philippines hosted the ASEAN Summit chaired by the President, we also hosted and as well as chaired the BIMP-EAGA Leaders Summit. So the special BIMP-EAGA Leaders Summit was convened precisely and more particularly to put forward the adoption of a new development framework in the BIMP-EAGA that will guide our trajectory of development, of planning, of initiatives, of private sector collaboration, and specific strategies for the next 10 years. So it's called BIMP-EAGA Vision 2035. What's highlighted in the BIMP-EAGA Vision 2035 are a number of key points. First, this time around, the focus of strong participation by the local governments. When we talked about BIMP-EAGA, this time around, we are talking about where local government units can play a very crucial role in terms of them being able to pursue productive interchange across the border, pursuing specific discussions in terms of connectivity, trade, and LGU to LGU cooperation among our local governments in Mindanao. That's why among those highlighted in the summit last week was the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, BARM, especially with its recent launch of the Bangsamoro Economic Corridor Development. They are now aligning several strategies in terms of development, in terms of investments, and connectivity sa BARM government, sa BARM area, in relation to its direct interaction with the BIMP-EAGA. Let us all understand that there is no other part of the Philippines much closest to any ASEAN country or BIMP-EAGA and BIMP-EAGA country, and that is BARM areas, particularly Tawi-Tawi, for instance. That's why it makes perfect sense. It is logical for BARM to lead the way in terms of establishing this formalized connectivity across the border, across these areas in terms of trade, in terms of tourism, and that's where BARM had been highlighted last week during the BIMP-EAGA Leaders Summit. Second is the strong involvement of the private sector. BIMP-EAGA 2035, the next wave of growth for the sub-region will have to be pursued more vigorously by the private sector. Because at the end of the day, the role of the governments of the 4 countries in the BIMP-EAGA is just to create an enabling environment, lay down the policies that will make it attractive for investments to come in. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the private sector, the businesses that will come in with their capital, put up the necessary investments, whether manufacturing, agro-processing, industries, and directly connecting to our medium, small, and medium, micro, small, and medium enterprises in terms of the entire value chain. And that is also now being pursued vigorously under BIMP-EAGA. And so when we attract investors in Mindanao, under the context of BIMP-EAGA, we are also making sure whether or not our areas are ready and available, and whether or not the connectivity had been established. Because when we pursue trade, integral to any realization of trade is connectivity. Direct flights, direct shipping routes that will facilitate movements of goods, peoples, and services. That's why it's being highlighted in the BIMP-EAGA Summit last week. Third point is the focus of the BIMP-EAGA priority infrastructure projects. Sa BIMP-EAGA, there is what we call PIPs, or priority infrastructure projects. From as small as 57 projects in 2017, it has now gone up to 265 priority infrastructure projects. More than 100 of these from Mindanao. The total cost for priority infrastructure projects, details are being provided to you, $174.6 billion US. This is the total amount of these priority projects: railway, airports, ports, transport connectivity, establishment of ecozones, and several other key priority projects across the focus areas of BIMP-EAGA. And in the case of Philippines, it's Mindanao and Palawan. So any major infrastructure project we have right now in Mindanao, and those that are still on the proposal stage, are now being tagged as BIMP-EAGA priority project. Why? Because we wanted every single airport, major bridge, port, or ecozone, or industrial hub in Mindanao to be directly connected and interacting with the strength of our neighbors. Because at the end of the day, our focus sa BIMP-EAGA is to be one base for production. Meaning to say, our raw materials and the raw materials of our neighbors to be value added here, for instance, and then the final product directed towards bigger market destination. That is the long-term target for the BIMP-EAGA. So local government, focus on the private sector, and the priority infrastructure projects that really need to be prioritized, accelerated, to make sure that we stay on track in terms of making sure that our areas in Mindanao are ready to accommodate the increasing interest of various local and foreign investors looking at opportunities for growth, opportunities for investment, and opportunities for development here in Mindanao. So essentially, those are the main key points. A number of items in the summit had already been reported in the last few days after the conclusion of the summit last week. But there are items that we'd like to be further highlighted and cited. And these are the areas of local government, strong participation. That's why a few weeks ago, in our last forum here at Habi at Kape, we highlighted the connectivity that is now being reestablished between Mindanao and Sulawesi, Governor Generoso and Miangas Island, Davao Oriental, Davao de Oro, and Davao, with our connectivity to Manado, the direct flights that we are pursuing between Manado and Davao. These are the very specific steps we're trying to work out right now, leading towards eventually establishing the connectivity that we need so that trade and tourism will become more viable once we have this connectivity established, especially within BIMP-EAGA.
Thank you, ASEC Montenegro. So we will now open the floor for questions from the media, starting off with Mr. Roy Moreno from EBS-FM. Okay. Mr. Bien Abanos from DXDC.
Hello, good morning po sa lahat. Bien Abanos sa DXDC RM in Davao. Para kay ASEC Montenegro and Dr. Monteverde, siguro nakita natin yung statement na inilabas ng Australia Embassy. Ma'am, unsa ni ka dako nga epekto sa diri sa ato sa Davao ang gihatag nga pamahayag sa Australia Embassy, ma'am? Sorry.
Okay. Where the travel advisories that come out every now and then from different embassies concerning Mindanao is not new to us. We've been tracking, monitoring every single issuance of travel advisory by different embassies because we also are trying to ascertain whether or not such travel advisory indeed reflect the actual situation on the ground. But generally, we respect the caution expressed by foreign embassies, particularly in their travel advisories. But it is important to underscore that Mindanao today remains safe and secure. And peace in Mindanao is not just an aspiration. All of us definitely can validate. Compared to where we were 20 years, 30 years ago, it's entirely different Mindanao that we are really having today, especially in the Bangsamoro region. Our people, our institutions, our security sector continue to safeguard progress so that development can continue to flourish in Mindanao. And in fact, recent economic data validated indeed the transformation we are seeing in the last recent years. 2025 economic performance pointed out that 5 of the 6 regions in Mindanao are in the top 10. And 5 of these 6 regions in Mindanao posted a growth rate of GRDP much higher than the national average. This is definitely an indication that Mindanao is on the path today to transform a region once associated with conflict, now turning into a hub for energy, for agribusiness, as well as for logistics. And the broad-based growth that we are seeing demonstrates that Mindanao is not only resilient, but is also thriving across multiple regions in Mindanao. And definitely, we continue to encourage our partners, especially the embassies, in terms of constructive dialogue, for them to be able to have their advisories truly reflect the actual situation on the ground.
Yes.
Yeah, can I just add? Actually, if we have a negative travel advisory, it really cascades to trade and commerce, and of course, into the tourism numbers that will be coming in. Because we do know that if there's a travel advisory, of course, there will be limited activities for persons on travel, and then, of course, the coverage for insurances and etc. But as what Yusek Romy said, there's always a re-evaluation if it truly reflects the things that is going on the ground. And if you've noticed, the exemptions that were given by this specific country's advisory were specifically focused on tourist areas, right? But then, if you look at the bigger picture, most of the big countries that are doing trade with us have no negative travel advisory at the moment, no? So what I'm trying to say is, it is up to us also to show them the figures and the real status that is happening on the ground. Maybe they have a different way of evaluating things, or some things have happened to that country that reflected their advisory, that is being reflected in their advisory. But in total, we can say that Mindanao is really thriving, especially so with the ASEAN right now, and the focus, of course, of MinDA, which is the BIMP, and recently with Davao, on that Davao-Borneo economic corridor also. So we see this not as a deterrent, but as a something that we need to work on and prove that it is really the other way around. So, thank you.
Pwede sorry, may ano ka, sir?
Yeah, I agree with the statement that we respect the issuance of travel advisories, but we continue to work here and based on data, the economic dynamism has been there and it's not disrupted by these advisories. In fact, Mindanao has been growing faster than the country's economic growth. As mentioned, there are 5 regions as stated by the PSA. So we have lined up and activities by the private sector, by the tourism, and perhaps this also could be a reminder and thought for our security sector to perhaps find strategies how to not put it stricter but have this advisory a consideration in their part. Thank you.
Nagpadala na po ba kayo ng mensahe sa lalo na yung MinDA at saka yung DCCCII or even ang DICTs at DTI po sa Australia Embassy na for them to reconsider their announcement or the advisory po?
We expect to have a meeting with the Deputy Ambassador of Australia on Friday, who is visiting Davao. Then that will be an opportunity for us to also convey our position in terms of the recent issuance of Australia's travel advisory to Mindanao.
As regards the private sector, Davao City Chamber of Commerce will have to have another meeting also with MinDA and that of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce for the whole of Mindanao, so that jointly we can come up with a statement on the travel advisory.
May ano po ba kayo na for the record lang po para sa mga tao na or for the investors nga na wala po talaga tayong problema dito sa Mindanao po?
They may have, the embassies may have their own way of obtaining information, intelligence gathering. They have their own specific means of carrying that out that probably had been the source of them coming up with that advisory. On our part, we're also closely coordinating with our security sector, the armed forces, the PNP, for instance. In fact, MinDA has been working closely with the PNP regional offices in Mindanao in terms of the conduct of our regular peace and security assessment of the situation in Mindanao. And on our part, there had not been any reports of such potential threats as indicated. But then again, these embassies may have their other way of obtaining information. But insofar as MinDA is concerned, based on our interaction with our partners from the security sector, there had been no indicated such major threats at the moment in the area.
Sige po. Sa iba naman din ako yung sa nangyaring crisis po. Ma'am, kumusta yung mga miyembro natin panahon ng crisis, ma'am? May mga nagsara ba na mga business establishments po?
We're with the MSMEs, no? And we all know that MSMEs comprises about more than 90% of the local economy and even for the national economies. Globally, ganun naman talaga ang trend when it comes to MSMEs. But with this energy crisis, no, it really has affected many of the micro and small enterprises. Some have closed, but the data I don't have at the moment. It's with the Department of Trade and Industry. Maybe they can come up with the exact data. But if you look at the greater picture, businesses still thrive, but the margins are really, really slim. So that the return of investments or their bottom lines are not that fast enough or for them to be able to recover or to be able to sufficiently cover whatever loans or whatever activities that they have. No? So there's really a negative effect, of course, for this fuel crisis. And it just doesn't point out to the businesses itself. But in the lifestyles and the way of life that we're doing, we don't travel a lot because of this scenario that happened, right? Especially when the prices hit almost 150. You can see the streets parang COVID pandemic times, di ba? So halos walang tao. It's similar to what is happening but much worser because trade and commerce and the logistics is really affected. And this is where the global economy is naapektuhan tayo nito because of the supply chain. No? So that's what's happening, especially so when it comes to fertilizers or the rest. But let's look at this the other way around. With this scenario, it is high time that us, the Philippines, both the government and the private sector, work together for sustainable industries that will, cover us for the next how many years, 50 years or a decade. Let's not look at this as something that negative na talaga, ganyan na talaga, no? But let's work on something positive out of this. Let this be a learning experience for us. Possibly we should tap more energy resources, the management, the supply chain. So that is up for the policy directions that the government will take and undertake in the coming months ahead.
May I add before Director Romy, tama si Doc Malo, what happened and as we saw it affecting many of the businesses is margin, ang tawag na sa economic terms is margin compression crisis. They continue to operate, they continue to serve, they continue to produce the kinds of products and commodities but at a smaller margin. Why? Because the production input has gone up. Mahal na ang fuel, mahal ang cost of logistics. In terms of our farming, for instance, our farm production affected in terms of margin because mahal ang fertilizer. And of course, the cost of fuel and the cost of logistics. But they continue to deliver, they continue to produce. Mas ninaog lang ang ilahang ilahang profit, ang margin. I think that is exactly what has happened generally. We have not noted major closures or stoppage of SMEs or investments. They just need to be adapting to the situation with some adjustments up until we see correction of the current situation. For instance, a few weeks ago, nisipa to 160 ang presyo sa diesel per liter. But today, as we are seeing it sa mga gasoline stations, for the first time in the last 2 years or 3 years, I guess, mas barato pa ang diesel kaysa gas. That already tells something in terms of slowly correction of this pricing that had really skyrocketed in the last recent days up until nag-normalize ang situation. Hopefully, kanaunta ang ato ang tanawon, makita nga direction in the next coming days in terms of the continuing correction of the prices, especially of fuel, considering that it always delivers for us a chain reaction. Pag mumahal gani ang presyo sa oil, mukonekta na ginatanan, mumahal ang kuryente, mumahal ang produkto, mumahal ang transportation and everything else, and therefore we expect a spiraling in terms of the inflation rates nato, especially the food inflation. That's why we hope na this time around, as pointed out by Doc Malu and generally by the business sector, very important lesson learned sa energy crisis that we went through in the last few months. Really, this na need to be resilient moving forward. That's why it's also important to point out that during the BIM-EAGA Summit and the ASEAN Summit also in Cebu last week, a major discussion centered on energy security. For instance, sa BIMP-EAGA, the 4 country leaders in their intervention and in their statements were one in saying that this time around we need to talk to each other and make sure that we are also working towards cooperating closely in keeping energy security within BIMP-EAGA and then within ASEAN. That's why a few days after that, DOE or Department of Energy already initiated discussions with Malaysia, and then later on we expect probably with Brunei and in Indonesia for us being able to work out. Kasi kita manggod naga-import ta, grabe net importer ta of fuel. Coal, for instance, 100% we import that from East Kalimantan, Indonesia. And that is 60% of our electricity supply coming from coal. And then, of course, we import a lot of diesel, 100% from abroad. although most of our diesel comes from the Middle East, gina-explore na karon, why not tap from our neighbors? Kasi naamang po sila supply, both of diesel, oil, as well as gas, LNG. Kaya lang, ang discussion is, how much can they allocate? For instance, if Philippines intends to source out from their country. So these are among those that are being discussed at the BIMP-EAGA level in terms of forming a framework of energy security. That's why a classic example of this, when Indonesia, I think 3 or 4 years ago, announced that they will impose a ban on export of coal, that worried us a lot. Kasi kung mag-ban si Indonesia sa export nila of coal, sang katutak nga brownout ang atuang ma-experiensyahan sa Pilipinas, dili lang Mindanao. Because 60% of our electricity is supplied by coal-fired power plants that import 100% coal from Indonesia. But because of our mechanism sa BIMP-EAGA, at that point, gi-explore nga baka pwedeng ma-exempt si Philippines from the ban of the export of coal from Indonesia. But eventually, wala siya na implement ni Indonesia. But mechanisms such as those, na in the event later on that these countries will have that policies, then there should be a way by which kita, Pilipinas, kay silingan lang man ta, there is a mechanism for us nga i-reconsider on our part in terms of them being able to continue to supply fuel for our needs, especially in our country.
Yeah, I think the other side has been well explained by by Doc Malo and by ASEC. Meaning there's been a disruption in terms of the production side, supply side, the business side, because of the factors of production, particularly energy that translate to power sometimes and translate to transport cost. No? So meaning yung margin has been that limited to some extent. There's another effect on this energy crisis because of the global impact is the market access. Meaning, even if you have products and market is not buying, so that's another problem that our MSMEs, even exporters, are also experiencing. So that it's good that maybe I will not say good, but it's a blessing that we have already some of these problems in the past, like COVID-19, because after that, we have trained and we have provided capacity building for our entrepreneurs to handle such as disasters and assist them to have a business continuity planning so that once a disaster or some disruption will be happening in their business, they can easily adjust. And if there are disruption, they can restore immediately. Not that closure or whatever. No? So, yun yung mga interventions namin. So, we have BCP planning, business continuity planning, and some have also availed of loans. No? So, we have launched about 4 loan windows sa business, small business corporation, which is available to women, to small enterprises, to those who would like to have alternative energy, and there's another one. And even other financing institutions are also offering some of this to our MSMEs, even farmers for Land Bank. I learned yesterday that Land Bank have also micro-lending now for farmers and cooperatives. No? So these are some of the programs, and since it's just happened March and then April, so May, so parang hindi pa masyadong naagapan pa nila yung disruption in terms of market. What is the realization now is that enterprises should diversify perhaps in terms of market and diversify in terms of business. Yung mga kaya, yung micro enterprises kasi isang business line lang siya, baka hindi pa niya kayang mag-diversify. But those who are able to diversify already into more product lines or market opportunities. So we assist them in terms of para hindi siya ano. And then maybe after 6 months, we can evaluate no anong nangyayari na. So we don't have data in terms of those who are closing, but we have assisted those who we have provided assistance no for those who are affected by the crisis.
Let me just give an opportunity also for the entrepreneurs of Davao and Mindanao who are listening to us right now. So you can download the app, SB Corp app, and then you can apply online, no, for loan financing. They can give up to 3 to 5 million, or I think 5 million, without collateral, no. But of course, you have to go through the process. And then beyond that, there's a collateral already. But then, for Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industries members, please approach your local chambers because there's going to be a special lane for an accommodation for loan assistance also. So upright, they can give as low as 300,000. And yeah, if you want to go through the process, then you can be given 5 million without collateral, but due process pa rin, no? And then, the rest is up to the processing time already. So, but there's a special lane for Philippine Chamber of Commerce members. So that's something that I think our entrepreneurs who are listening to us can tap on, especially now that uso yung online applications, no? So, download the app, SB Corp app. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we proceed, this is just a gentle request because we have a lot of media friends who would like to ask questions to just limit your line of questioning to just one per panelist and then one follow-up maximum so that we can accommodate all media. So let's hear from Sir Roy Moreno of ABS-FM.
Good morning, ma'am, sir. Sa nakita lang natong report, ma'am, no, and sir, and record nga nisaka nagyudgikan sa 57 o 57 nga do sa 265 na ka mga BIMP-EAGA priority nga mga projects. Unsa may rason nga nung paspas kayo ang pagsaka ni ini, sir, sa mga project o proyekto po?
Dahan, salamat. Well, it was noted nga isa sa reason sa pagsaka is the strong interest of private sector in pushing for many of these projects via PPP. Kaniad tumanggod, especially in the case of Philippines. Daghan sa mga, of the 265, all across 4 countries sa BIMP-EAGA, but focus areas lang, not the entire country. In the case of Philippines, it's only Mindanao and Palawan. Sa Mindanao and Palawan, of the 265, 104 ang atua. Many of these projects are big-ticket projects that are being pursued via PPP. So, meaning to say, the financing options for implementing these projects are now hybrid. Dili lang entirely government via loan or via GAA, but with the private sector already coming in. I think this has also resulted to increase in the number of projects. In some other areas, particularly in Indonesia and Malaysia, as well as Brunei, because of the expansion that is also happening in their areas, especially in Indonesia. Massive ang expansion that are happening in Indonesia in terms of their manufacturing and their downstream mineral industry. For instance, Indonesia and Philippines lead the world in terms of nickel production. Number 1 si Indonesia, second si Philippines. In terms of nickel output, in the Philippines, that is about 80% na diri sa Mindanao, particularly in Dinagat Islands and Surigao areas. Nickel, which is a critical component for the manufacturing of batteries. Now, batteries which are now needed for electric vehicles, whether pure EV or hybrid, sa mga technologies, gadgets, and also batteries that are needed for energy storage with the massive deployment of renewable energy, particularly solar-powered capacity nga hybridized with battery. And that's why there is now a skyrocketing demand for batteries. And this is where the expansion of the nickel industry is also following through. And so Indonesia have expanded their industries in terms of coming up with projects into manufacturing of batteries now. And mainstreaming many of their mineral industry, particularly coal. So, particularly nickel. And so, this growth in Indonesia, and so with the manufacturing in Malaysia, they need to be supported with transport connectivity, for instance, improvement of the roads. Mao po na nga susama sa tuwa diri sa Mindanao and sa Palawan, daghan pod silang ginungag nga mga proyekto sa BIMP-EAGA. Sa atua diri sa Pilipinas, particularly Mindanao and Palawan, kadaghanan gid niini ang ato ang major ports and airports and then road projects, including the Samal Bridge nato is also identified as a BIMP-EAGA priority project. Why is it called BIMP-EAGA nga wa man ni directly konekta sa 3 other countries? The same question na siya nganong ang tawag nato sa tuang National Highway, ASEAN Highway. Di ba? Ang tawag nato sa highway all the way from General Santos to Butuan or to Cagayan de Oro, including paglahos sa Visayas all the way to Luzon, it's called ASEAN Highway because that's our virtual highway connecting to ASEAN. Mao pod sa BIMP-EAGA. Our projects, our Davao Airport is tagged as a BIMP-EAGA project because we will be serving BIMP-EAGA connectivity routes later on. Mao pod ang atuang other neighboring countries. Many of their ports, airports are also tagged as BIMP-EAGA priority projects because they will be serving later on BIMP-EAGA connectivity. So those are among the reasons cited as to the increase in the number of priority infrastructure projects sa BIMP-EAGA.
Okay po. Thank you, sir. For Ma'am Maria po. Ma'am, giunsa ba pagtabang sa kining ASEAN Innovation Summit 2026 aron nga mahimo or kining mas competitive pa ang mga MSMEs nato din sa Davao o sa Mindanao panahon sa AI o digital transformation po?
Okay, the real focus of Davao City Chamber's event for this year is really pointing out or going through the ASEAN, no? Upgrading, upskilling, no? Our MSMEs to the Industry 5.0. And that is which you've mentioned, IoTs, AIs, robotics, smart manufacturing, and even smart agriculture, no? So the main reason is because of this disruption that is happening and us being the ASEAN chair, we would want to level up, no? Our competitiveness in the global markets. That's why we focus on innovations. Like what you've just asked ASEC Mayo kanina, no? How come there's an increase in the number of PIPPs? From the private sector, we see this disruption as an opportunity. Opportunity to recalibrate, reassess your position, and then what are the things that are doable, no, at the moment and which you would need to improve on. And I think with the present and the current situation that we have, the countries have gathered together and they saw that there should be more synergy and collaboration in dealing with the concerns or issues at hand, especially on security, fuel, and everything else. So that's the same thing with the MSMEs, no? So right now, this is the opportune time for the MSMEs to be able to innovate and become more competitive. So we're bringing in speakers, exhibitors from other countries to join in during this event. By the way, we also have a golf tournament which is on the 16th of September, just prior to the event. And we have our, of course, very strong support from MinDA for this event, together with the Department of Trade and Industry and our much-loved city of Davao, also joining in to promote the Davao-Borneo corridor. So we have a lot of things to look forward to this activity. It's not just about innovations on this level, but really touching base on the ground, what the MSMEs and the entrepreneurs should do and can do and improve during these times and be more, not like, nation building lang, no? Hindi lang ganon. But we should be more globally competitive. And that's the goal of this event.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Let me call on Sir Dennis from the XUM.
Good morning, guests. Mamaya na, hindi na siguro ako magtatanong sa iyo, ASEC, Romeo, Montenegro. Just to say, I miss you so much for how many years. Karon lang tagkakita, mura pug mag-uyab. Anyway, my question is actually intended for you. It's up to you on how would you, ano. Ako, I feel envy ba when I saw Cebu hosted the ASEAN, yung prangkahan tayo na. May panahon pa ba? May tsansa pa ba nga ang Davao City will do the same as what we had seen in Cebu na ASEAN, mag-host tayo? ASEC, Romeo, Montenegro, sir? What do you think? Kaya natin? After mga 2 years from now?
Salamat, Dens. I asked the same question po when I was in Cebu. How I wish, no? We are as ready as Cebu in terms of hosting such level of international event like ASEAN. Although it wasn't easy for Cebu to also make itself ready and available for the conduct of ASEAN. And sa tuwa diri sa Mindanao, of course, Davao City would be able to at some point, di lang ko sure kano sa pwede na. But as to whether or not we have that capacity, we hosted last year the conduct of the BIMP-EAGA Ministers meeting and Senior Officials meeting sa Island Garden City of Samal. So if we bring in international event here in Mindanao, in Davao, in Cagayan de Oro, we would be able to do that perhaps probably on a ministerial level. Pero kung heads of states na,
medyo mahirap
country
pa.
leaders na, kay for instance, sa ASEAN, 11 countries ni, plus the Timor-Leste, the newest one. So, 11 ka heads of states, 11 ka different preparations. Bawat isa ka country, isa ka hotel mangguna sila. Di pwede isa ka country, isa ka hotel, duha tulo ka countries. No. One hotel, one country. That's one consideration, for instance. So, do we have 11 hotels already at that stature that can accommodate a big delegation coming from the Sultan of Brunei and the entire delegation, and then the Prime Minister of Malaysia and the entire delegation in each of the hotel we have here, for instance, in Mindanao. Cebu has, because Cebu is pretty much advanced good compared sa Tua.
More than.
In terms of them being a destination. The airport po nila, kung mag-parking ang 11 ka eroplano, for instance, di na masulod rin sa tuang Davao Airport. Sa Cebu, yes. Because dako ang ilahang airport, dako ilahang capacity to accommodate wide-bodied jets, for instance. Something that is of a challenge sa tuwa. Baka grabe ang traffic sa aeroplano pag mulanding sila diri sa Davao to accommodate the arrival of the heads of states and their delegations. So that's another item. But as to whether or not our private sector and business community and government would be able to pull it through at such a level, kaya na to. Ang facilities lang as to whether or not naana ba ta. For instance, do we have a big international convention center na ba diri sa Davao? Wala pa ta of that category manggod karon. We only have our existing now, but not to the level pang one convention center plus you have probably 10 smaller conference rooms and meeting rooms, just like what they have in Cebu and in Manila, for instance. I think challenge po ni siya sa ato ang mga property developers, and I think we understand daghanan nagasugod og construct ani karon, leading towards eventually making Davao ready to handle international expositions, international trade exhibits, international conferences, and international level meetings such as ASEAN Summit, for instance. Siguro we are in that we are on path to achieving that readiness here in Mindanao.
I will not violate the protocol or the rules of Ma'am Iris. I'll go directly to Director Romeo Castañaga. It's up to the DCCCII to say also about my question. Pero dito muna ako kay Director Castañaga, my last question. Director, if kung marami bang magpa-rehistro ng business name, is that an indication na medyo maraming the influx of business interest sa region? Is that an indication na maraming gusto magnegosyo despite of sa sitwasyon na to karon with all the political challenges that we have now? So tingin mo pag ganon medyo okay ang takbo pa rin?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
So pag maraming sa amin sa DTI, because our is the single proprietorship, and meaning may tatlo kasi itong cases. So if
Okay.
you are a corporation, you have to register with the SEC.
Uh-huh.
If you are a cooperative, register with the Cooperative Development Authority, and single proprietorship, it's with DTI. The more accurate na basihan is the business permit, because that's the time that they really engage into business by the LGUs. No, so in fact, may discrepancy in terms of number of the PSA, in terms of the number of enterprises and the record of the Business Bureau nationwide. Mas marami yung Business Bureau, meaning baka ito yung mas accurate na data and determination that an economy is growing because increasing yung registering in terms of businesses. And
But that is considered as parang hindi pa sure.
yung sa amin kasi, sir, MDTI, but yung sa amin kasi, it's a business name, meaning
Okay.
you register your name, just my name, Romeo.
Okay.
But it's not yet the license to do business. You have to go to the Business Bureau and register it, and that's officially a business that will take place. And then yung renewal, yung sa amin kasi is 5 years. And yung Business Bureau is yearly. So, I mean, for a better appreciation that the economy is growing is for the renewal. No, so kung ako, nag-register ako ngayon, tapos nag-renew ako next year. So meaning, my
Okay
business
lang.
is growing, and okay lang.
Lalong-lalo na sa DTI, total, bayad naman. Pag parehistro mo, bayad man yun.
Mabayad mang
Diba?
yun.
Thank you very much, Director, and the rest of the guests. Thank you
I'll
very
just add something to what you just mentioned, Denise.
ma'am.
No? It's so true that the business permits is really the thing that you need to count on when it comes to, is the interest there? Is that person or that corporation really interested in doing business in Davao?
Okay.
Yeah. So with this kasi, like what DTI-RD said, business renewal is very important because it is one of the gauge that you are really interested in doing business in that city. So that's the reason why from the private sector, we always push for ease of doing business. It should be easy registration, easy application, easy renewal of your business permits. Unfortunately, there are some kinks along the way that doesn't deliver the goods or the permits as is, no? So that's the reason also some of the businessmen or the entrepreneurs have hesitancy in really pushing for having that business idea of theirs, no? So kami from the private sector, we always would want that there should be ease of doing business. And that's the reason we collaborate and coordinate with the city government of Davao, specifically for the Davao City Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, thank you very much, guests. Again, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dennis, let me now call on Wendell Geronimo from Davao Today.
Good day po. I have I have only 2 questions. So first question kay, how might be the impeachment proceedings involving Vice President Sara Duterte affect the investor confidence and economic cooperation within the BIMP-EAGA sub-region, especially in trading and agriculture?
The impeachment is a political exercise. Insofar as the economic, we continue to pursue economic activities, facilitation. So at certain point, with the continuing interest of the private sector, looking at opportunities we have in Mindanao and BIMP-EAGA, then we see certainly a continuing engagement in terms of the economic activities in our cooperation, even against the backdrop of a political exercise such as impeachment happening out there in Manila, for instance.
So ano na po, in light of fluctuating fuel prices, so is there any proposal po for sharing of all resources within BIMP-EAGA?
Yeah, as I have stressed earlier, part of major discussions of the IAGA leaders during their summit, the special IAGA Leaders Summit last week, was on energy security and coming up with a framework by which access to fuel resources would be made available. And that's why it's being started now with the Department of Energy. They had discussions already with the Malaysian counterpart, particularly on that regard. And definitely this is going to be pursued also with Indonesia as well as with Brunei. Kasi both Indonesia and Brunei as well as Malaysia are also producers of fuel, and particularly oil and gas. And in the case of Indonesia, coal, which is we definitely import 100% for electricity requirements. So yes, there's a mechanism being worked out already.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Sir Wendiel from Davao Today. Let me call on Sir Rudolph Alama from PIA 11.
Una kay Sir Romeo. Yung sa Tokushima... Romeo. Romeo to RD DTI. Yung sa Tokushima auction market. How does it benefit yung mga parang coconut products kasi yun siya how does it benefit, and will it facilitate the entry of more coconut exports from Davao to Japan?
Yes. So by the way, we witnessed the signing of the memorandum of agreement between Davao Katigan, manufacturer of cocoa byproducts, and Tokushima auction market of Japan to facilitate the export of coconut products, starting with this cooperative, and therefore directly they will benefit from this arrangement. But since we have invited the other stakeholders also during the meeting, and they witness that opportunity. So if this will materialize, other stakeholders may also avail of that market opportunity with Japan, and therefore they will also be benefiting from that. So embedded in that is the capacity building and the technologies of Japan, so that quality assurance in terms of the Japanese market will also be complied by the cooperatives.
So, follow up, yung Katigan lang yung initial
Yung MOA
first.
kahapon is Katigan muna.
But there are others
But pag may mga ganyan kasi at we have a number of coconut cooperatives and associations, they may be able to link also with maybe still with Tokushima or other companies in Japan later.
Thank you, sir. To ASEC, yung katapos lang na ASEAN Summit, including yung BIMP, how does it all in all benefit Mindanao, lalo na yung sa mga big ticket projects natin na ginagawa?
Yeah. One main reason why we have always advocated for Mindanao projects, particularly ports, airports, bridges, and major highways to be captured, tagged, categorized as BIMP-EAGA priority infrastructure projects, is our effort to leverage on these projects insofar as national priority in fund allocation. Kasi pag BIMP-EAGA tag priority project siya, it is our international commitment with the rest of the BIMP-EAGA countries that we are pursuing this project according to timeline, because this is what we have committed as part of our responsibility and role in the BIMP-EAGA. Same thing as the other 3 countries are also committing the projects they have enrolled as BIMP-EAGA priority to be pursued according to timelines as well. Meaning to say, when we implement project here in Mindanao, in the context of BIMP-EAGA, it is not just from the standpoint of Philippines, from the standpoint of BIMP-EAGA as a whole. Kasi there is a semblance of connectivity between our facilities, infrastructure project here, and the infrastructure project across the border. So I think that's one very important dimension captured in terms of strategic value of these projects being categorized as BIMP-EAGA. The prioritization at the national level and the allocation of budget for this project to be fully implemented according to timeline.
Yan yung PPP na paano?
Yeah. Kasali din dito ang PPP being identified as BIMP-EAGA with strong support of the government becomes an incentive for the private sector to come in. Either via, dalawa kasi ang entry ng private sector sa PPP. either via unsolicited proposal or solicited proposal. Pag solicited proposal, binibid out ng gobyerno. Kung airport dan siya, ibibid out ng government, DOTR for instance, to potential proponents. And then they will compete kung sino ang mas magandang offer. Pag unsolicited, somebody will submit a proposal to the government through DOTR. For instance, if it's an airport, and then i-review ng DOTR and then goes through the PPP Center, and then all the way up to the determination of the Investment Coordinating Committee bago ma-award sa isang private proponent. But, meaning to say, the very fact that MinDA and PPP Center had opened a PPP facilitation at MinDA is an indication of our readiness to attract, encourage more of PPPs, especially for big-ticket projects in Mindanao. Meaning to say, as Secretary Magno has always pointed out, that there is another route for funding and financing projects that we need in Mindanao. Previously, traditionally or conventionally has been funded through government via GAA or loans from the development partners. But this time around, these projects can be actively promoted via public-private partnership or the private sector coming in. And so that's where, via that leveraging as BIMP-EAGA TAG project, that we can attract more of the private sector for these projects.
Okay. Last question to Doc Malu. Doc, kasi marami yung mga innovations or kung saan po tayo yung looking at na concentrate or kuha tayo na innovation or technology para sa ating MSMEs, and ano yung opportunity, saan yung malaking opportunities na pwede makagalaw yung ating SMEs?
Okay, thank you for that. Actually, when we look at the ASEAN Innovation Expo, the focus really on upgrading and upscaling, like what I've mentioned. And of course, the availment or your access to the technologies. So, it will be more on, kasi agricultural based tayo eh. So, it will be more of smart agriculture and then a cross-section of all innovations that is happening all over the world. So that is what we're going to bring in for the ASEAN Innovation Summit.
So, ilan na po yung magsali from other ASEAN countries na nag-commit?
From at this point, we have about 4 or 5 already who have committed. So we're just finalizing together with the ASEAN Secretariat for the invites for the rest who are coming over.
4 or 5 countries or?
4 or 5 countries, yes.
Okay, thank you, Sir Rudolph. Let me call on for the last question, Ms. Eunice Felipe of Sansar Davao.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. So, my question is for Sir Montenegro po. This is connected sa kadtong travel advisory sa nagipagawa sa Australian Embassy po. And then, I would like to ask, sir, what do you think is the basis of this issuance? Because so far, wala man tay major terrorism attacks sa Mindanao and even sa urban regions here in the island, except atong katong ambush of 5 police sa Maguindanao del Sur and last March. So, what do you think is their basis po, sir?
We asked the same question as well to the embassy as to the basis of them coming up. But then again, as pointed out earlier, they have their own way of gathering intelligence information. They have their own means of assessing situations and obtaining essential information from different sources for them to be able to come up with a decision. We understand it's also not just a decision at the embassy level. It goes all the way up to their head country. I mean to say from Canberra, for instance, we're the capital of Australia. So we respect them having their assessment of the situation on the ground and coming up with those advisories. That's why our effort is to proactively engage with them in terms of providing on-the-ground situation as well, as part of our effort for them to do a reassessment of the situation. And that's a question also that we will ask later on the Deputy Ambassador of Australia who's visiting Davao this Friday.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eunice. We would have wanted to continue with our discussion as it is already very engaging, but unfortunately, we are lacking time already. But we are requesting our media friends to just do your ambush interview after. All right, so at this point, we will be asking for the closing statement of our guests, starting off with Dr. Maria Lourdes Monteverde of the Davao Chamber.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. This is such a welcome meeting, no, of old friends. Yeah. So, in behalf of the Davao City Chamber of Commerce, we would like to invite everyone, especially those who are into the MSMEs, no, nakafocus tayo doon. And of course, our guests and participants, if they are reserve the dates, September 17 to 19, to join in the ASEAN Innovations, MSMEs at the forefront of Industry 5.0. This will be a back-to-back event with our longest agriculture trade fair, which is the Davao Agri Trade Expo. That's the 28th year already. So we're going to have this also together with the ASEAN Innovation Summit. And for those who are into the golf, we also have a golf tournament, and not really a very engaging golf tournament, like very competitive, but it's going to be the ASEAN Innovation Summit Golf Tournament on September 16. So this will all be at the SMX Lanang. So we would want to invite everyone to join us and learn more, and maybe you can get something out of the meetings that we will have, engage with the people who are going to join in, do network, and do business here in Davao.
Thank you, Mama Lou. Let's hear the closing statement of Director Romeo Castañaga of DTI.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was not there in the summit, BIMP-EAGA Summit, but our sector has been extensively discussed. That's the trade and investment strategies. So we hope that all of these preparations and promotion for trade and investments with the resumption, we hope, of the connectivity that we have, the air linkages, the sea linkages, and all the plans that we have for investment promotion, including one that is the ASEAN Innovation Summit, will be pushed through and successful. And we have a fruitful engagement with not only BIMP-EAGA, but also with our ASEAN partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Romy. Let's now hear the closing statement of ASEC Montenegro from MinDA.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. If I may just add, very last important point that I missed out earlier in terms of highlights of the IAGA Summit. The four leaders also stressed under BIMP-EAGA Vision 2035 the need to pursue stronger collaboration with development partners. Meaning to say other countries that are supporting BIMP-EAGA. For now, our development partners are Republic of Korea that had been funding several projects, among of which is innovation related to agriculture, remote sensing technology for coffee production, for instance. That's an example of a BIMP-EAGA Korea Fund facilitated project na pasok sa innovation that was cited earlier by Doc Malu. China has been assisting in several capacity building trainings undertaken in the BIMP-EAGA. And then, of course, Australia, particularly Northern Territory Australia. But this time around, we are proposing that a stronger and more enhanced collaboration with the entire Australia na, dili lang kay Northern Territory. Northern Territory kasi is that part of Australia that is closer to us. But this time around, what the leaders also agree on is to pursue broader collaboration with Australia. And last, the possible participation of the European Union into the BIMP-EAGA as development partner. And Philippines is the one that is initiating discussions with this, with the European Union, through the European Union ambassador to the Philippines. And so later on, MinDA will be pursuing discussions with the EU ambassador to ASEAN to already bring this up to the ministerial level. And so that we look forward to EU being adopted during November this year na ministers meeting for its formal adoption as a development partner of the BIMP-EAGA. EU is a very important addition to our several development partners because EU has been supporting many of our initiatives in Mindanao, especially in the Bangsamoro region. And so we look forward that many of these aspirations in the BIMP-EAGA will eventually translated into actual projects. Projects that will be characterized by private sector involvement, translated into investments, and so that we continue to see jobs being created, products being produced, and so that our communities, especially in the border areas of the BIMP-EAGA, will be able to see the benefits of this regional cooperation, translating for them incomes, jobs, opportunities, and then therefore a better future for them via this sub-regional cooperation. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, ASEC. On behalf of the Mindanao Development Authority, headed by our Chairperson, Secretary Leo Tereso Magno, I would like to thank our guests, our constants, of course, Director Romy, our very own ASEC, and our partner, Mamalu. Thank you for sharing to us the strategic role of the government and the private sector to the BIMP-EAGA and ASEAN. So thank you very much to our media partners present here today, our media partners monitoring online, our online viewers in our MinDA Facebook page, our partners, Ayala Malls, Abreeza, and Habi at Kape. Thank you very much, everyone. See you again next episode.